Hello, everybody. I'm John Yeager, and this show is about the ability to take courageous action. It's called The Courage Keepers, and it talks about us as courage seekers, people who are really looking to make the right moves and do the right thing. It's also about courage keepers, those of us in leadership positions where we can actually help and support people that we lead to be more courageous. And the third piece in there is it's about courage champions. And courage champions work in organizations where they help to bring out the best in those people that they serve there too. While many people think of courage in like the rare and monumental acts of bravery, this is more about the day-to-day stuff. It's about looking at the notion of, am I enough? Do I belong? How do I deal with uncertainty? It's less about physical danger and more about the social courage necessary to behave well in a world that doesn't always make good behavior easy. It's also about building not just a physical muscle, but more of a courage muscle that we can do. And this podcast will help you get to that point. In each podcast, we'll have guests who are currently courage keepers and courage champions, and they'll talk about their experiences and helping other people to become braver. In each of our eight podcasts, we'll focus on a different courage pathway or route that people can take to brave action. And this podcast is mostly focused today on connection. However, we're going to flip the script a little bit because today I have with me Senior Executive Coach and Courage Keeper and Champion, Erica Moore, with us. I met Erica last fall at a conference at the University of Pennsylvania. We're both graduates of the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology program there, a couple of years apart there, and we were grouped together in what we call an appreciative jam. And an appreciative jam is an opportunity to talk among a specific subject and really to almost like a focus group and to learn and gain a lot of knowledge about that. And the focus of this group was how do you develop your courage roadmap. And Erica was just she's a thought leader, and she was able to bring out the best in the whole group and actually the best in me and help me to begin to look at some things a little bit different, especially as I embark into taking a deep dive into the Courage Keeper concept there too. So Erica suggested that we flip the script here, okay? And so she's going to ask me some questions about my why and about the Courage Keepers. Then I'll flip it back to her. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, John. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. Yeah.
So thank you for inviting me into the chair of interviewer. I know we've only known each other for a few months, but it's been just such a rich experience to get to know you and get to grow alongside you. So thank you. It's a great honor to be on your podcast. And we'll start with my favorite question, which is tell us your story. What brought you here to a podcast on courage?
Well, I'm an educator, coach, storyteller, husband, and father. And I've always been interested in the notion of courage, and I find that the term is very much overused and misunderstood today to a certain degree. I also have begun to look at courage and its role in effective leadership. So if you say the term brave leadership, they kind of need to go together. But only recently have we observed courage as being not just an accolade, but more of a process or a framework. And my ongoing mission is to help to develop and provide a general framework to support people in taking brave action. Several stories have really impacted me in how I look at courage. One happened in 2018 when I love to ride my bike, and I got back from my bike ride with an excruciating pain in my lower right side of my back. And so it happened the next time I rode my bike. So I went to my PCP, who suggested he do an EKG on it, check my heart rhythms, and it was a little off there. And so he referred me to a cardiologist who I went to see, who then had me get on the treadmill and do a stress test. So they hooked me up with electrodes, and and had me get on this incline on this treadmill, and I was going to crush it, and I didn't. I lasted 4 minutes. No pain, but I was totally out of breath. My heart rhythms were all out of whack. They rushed me to the ER, and within 24 hours, I was in St. Joe, Mishawaka Hospital, having an 8-hour five-way bypass surgery where they had to open up my chest and replace 5 of my arteries with grafts from the rest of my body. I'm fine now, but I don't know if that was about courage as much at that time. It was more about just kind of surviving. But the courage that really came out of this was with my wife, a courage seeker, but she also, as she was sitting there in the waiting room for 8 hours, in a cold waiting room, just seeing, what's going to be happening here, and getting the fortitude to be supportive of me when I came out of surgery and out of recovery. But she actually became my courage keeper. And as a courage keeper, she was there to support me and help me get my mojo back over the next several months. And that was really challenging for me. That was a trauma to the body that really affected my head a lot. And as I went back into my consulting and to my teaching, it took a while. And but I God bless her for her courage keeper piece there. The second story happened a year before that, in 2017, when I was teaching a health issues or a health behavior course at the Culver Academies in Culver, Indiana, Northwest Indiana. And basically, I'd been teaching for many, many years, since 75. And the students in the class, it was an interesting class because they were all brainiacs. They were in 2 or 3 APs together, and they got scheduled all into the same class together. So I had to be very, very creative in how I ran the class. And I thought I was doing a pretty good job until they had them midterm look at their portal and write in their evaluations for the midterms of me. And when I asked them to do that, I got a couple giggles and a couple snickers from some of the students, and that got my spidey sense going and go, what's going on here? And I started getting really concerned. Am I really doing a good job in here or not? So on Sunday, I checked the portal out when the comments became available, and I was right. They hammered me. And one of the comments there, which I'll never forget, is saying, Yeager should just show movies. And that really affected me. And did I really belong in what I was doing anymore? Was I over the hill? Was I enough? So what I did is I reached out to one of our seniors who was in that class, Nick Cephalo, who was also a major school leader. Nick was not in the class that Friday. He was sick, but I talked to him about this, and because he was kind of the voice of reason, and he goes, Coach Yeager, you're a good guy. We like you, and we've had you in some other classes before. But where we are right now, our focus is so much on getting into college, getting our 4s and 5s on our AP exams, and taking care of that early decision stuff and writing essays. And so our bandwidth is really shortened for this class. And so that's where the energy is. And that really helped to talk me off the ledge. But he became my courage keeper, an 18-year-old becoming a courage keeper of a more experienced in age person there too. The last piece happened several years ago when I worked with a community leadership class in Marshall County, where I live. And we had students from 6 different schools in the high schools in the county take part in this program, leadership program. And our first class was held at a retreat center, and we had a ball. We had a blast. A lot of interactive games and vulnerability, getting to know each other. It was great. So I thought we were off and going. And so our next class was a month later. We had it in a different, more of a classroom type setting. And we talked about, how do you make tough decisions as a high school junior? Well, I bit off more than I can chew. I went a bridge too far, and the students did not respond. It was a little too tough for them at this time. For the majority of them, a couple did. But so, anyways, I saw some of their heads go down, like immobilized. I'm not saying a word here, and I began to get anxious and actually fearful. Are they going to come back to the next session? What's going on here? So we were able to work that through, okay, and I was able to kind of work it, so that we were able to reestablish the mission of the class and the activity of the students throughout the year. Those three stories that happened within the last 10 years were things that really got me very, very interested in the notion of bravery and courage. Whether you're an 18-year-old courage seeker, a 16-year-old courage seeker, or a 60-something courage seeker and courage keeper.
Wow, such a powerful answer. And thank you for sharing your stories. I'm so glad you're okay. And that first story had a more happy ending. And such incredible examples of what it looks like to be courageous, even when we're having professional, tough news.
Sure,
And we
sure.
all have those moments. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I hear what brought you here, and I hear your why in those stories. I'm curious what you would want listeners to know about courage that might help them have more of it.
I think one is that courage can be learned. And I look at it as being a preloaded process. And that's my ongoing mission, to help with this framework and support people of all different ages to look at what is your process to making a courageous or a brave decision. And if we look at courage as being taking a meaningful risk, okay, and despite fear that might be involved with that, and so within that process, really looking at preloading this by looking at what are our behaviors that go into this whole process. And some people will look at courage as being something spontaneous, just happens. And once again, we're not talking about the rare and monumental acts, okay, but we're talking about the day-to-day stuff. But that preload of even viewing something spontaneous, what was going on in your head in the past that has allowed for you to make that spur of the moment action, okay? Or an action that takes a while to think through before you get to that point. And I saw that as being a really important thing that I want people to understand a little bit more. And I'm really enjoying the process of going through different organizations, whether it be manufacturing in corporate groups, or working with first year college students or faculty and staff of college nursing schools, wherever it might be, helping them to see how this process, they can work at that as a courage seeker, but also have them help seekers work that as being courage keepers.
Fantastic. And how would you imagine any of those, the courage seekers, keepers, or
Champions.
champions, how would they use your podcast, do you think?
I think they would use the podcast to get a variety of different pieces of information that they could supplement in their own lives, in their own work in leading other people. I look at this courage piece as almost like a courage GPS, a directional piece to get to a location. And I look at the GPS as one's growth with that, which is greater self-awareness, okay, and in a growth mindset to understand our thoughts, our emotions, our physical responses to looking at taking this risk, and then going through a variety of different pathways or behaviors that we can call upon to help get us to go to the third piece, which is the shift to action. And the shift to action, Erica, really is the idea of changing to a new action pattern, okay, and doing that through new thoughts, new actions, new emotions, new physical responses there.
Well said. Well said. And how will people reach you if they want to learn more or hire you?
They can come to the Courage Keepers website, which is www.thecouragekeepers.com, and also our Courage Keepers LinkedIn and Facebook sites. And from that process, getting you on our mailing list so we can get you our monthly newsletter to share more about information with you with that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you would want to share with our listeners before we flip back?
Well, just to understand the notion of that we are all courage seekers. We all have those moments daily, where some level of brave action may come in. But what of our capacity to be able to help other people? Okay, and help other large groups of people and organizations. That is something I want to stress and talk more about during our 8 podcasts that deal with the courage pathways. So let's flip the script, okay, for you. Erica basically is a senior executive coach and has worked with a variety of organizations and is actually a certified facilitator with Brene Brown's Dare to Lead program. And when we were getting ready for this podcast, Erica so nicely suggested that we did flip the script to get the audience up to speed right here. But what I want to do is to send this over to you, Erica, and have us tell us your story and what brought you here to this podcast on courage.
Yeah, great. It's a bit of an unlikely path. I didn't expect to be. I never set out to study or support people in being more courageous. But I think, and pardon, I spent 20 years in the United States Coast Guard, so there might be a few nautical metaphors today. But I think there are 3 lines of position that really came together. First is this notion of confidence that I've been fascinated by for quite a while. In fact, I wrote my MAP thesis on it as well, my master's in positive psychology thesis. And this idea that what we believe about our own capabilities will then translate into different behaviors. And also noticing in this mostly masculine organization that the women around me tended to underestimate and have lower beliefs in their own confidence, and that the men around me tended to round up, and that they got different results. And so I was always fascinated, and I always wanted the people around me, whether they were men or women, to have more confidence, because I could see how that was translating to better outcomes. Then right around, it's probably over a decade ago, I started my coach credential training. And I learned about beliefs, core beliefs, beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about the world, and how I think of that as that's our internal operating system. And so confidence is one of those kinds of beliefs, but there's also other beliefs about the world and ourselves and how the world works. And I really think, what I've come to understand is that's the work that coaches do, is they help you rewrite your operating system to deal with new challenges that you're facing and to scale your leadership. So I got more curious and better understanding about beliefs, tack that onto my understanding of confidence and curiosity there. And then enter in the picture Dr. Brene Brown wrote the book Dare to Lead and offered a program which I quickly signed up for back in 2018 is actually when I applied, but was trained in 2019 in her 24-hour, 3-day leadership curriculum that is a courage building program and teaches, to your point, 4 very observable, measurable, teachable steps to grow your courage muscle. So that's how I got here.
You talk about the operating system, and I believe that a lot of times people have an operating system that they're not even aware of, and then trying to make that shift can be discomforting and uncomfortable. Can you speak to that?
So true, absolutely. I think when I think about leadership development, it's really the most important muscle you have to grow as a leader is self-awareness, right? And so in many ways, the work of leadership development is identifying your current operating system. What are those beliefs? And then what's serving you? And then how do those beliefs need to evolve or shift or change? What's more true? Because sometimes those beliefs are partially true and we have to just expand our perspective. That's how I think about that.
Okay, thanks. Erica, what's one thing you would want your listeners to know about courage that might help them have more of it?
I think the first and foremost idea that I would want to share with everyone is that we're all afraid every day. Something about, living a human life means that things are going to be scary and they can be the smallest moments, to your point, like everyday courage, right? So, for example, here are some ways that courage shows up in organizations. Your student exhibited incredible courage. So giving someone feedback, even more importantly, someone who has more power than you, with the intention to help them grow, right? Even though that message might be difficult for them to receive. That's courageous. Sharing your perspective that's different than the boss because you know you'll make a better strategic choice when everybody at the table has your perspective that only you can see, right? Admitting a mistake so that it can be rectified and learned from. So all these are ways that we exhibit courage and in our organizations. And a lot of those are about saying more, but it can also be courage can also be about saying less.
Mm,
So
yeah.
courage might be a boss who's willing to sit in a room and say, I don't have all the answers and we need to figure this out together. That's what courage looks like. It can also be sitting with someone who's having a terrible day. Maybe they just got news that they're being laid off or they didn't get a promotion they were really excited about, and not trying to fix it. Just having the courage to sit with someone while they're in pain and just stay connected to them, right? So that's what I would want people to know is those things. And maybe one of those things is scary for you. Maybe all of those things are scary for you, but those, the fear that we experience when we're about to do something hard and courageous is a human experience. If you feel that fear, it does not mean you're weak. It simply means you're about to do something brave. That's what I would want people to know. And then I think the other part that, as a leadership coach, I feel compelled to share, right, is what happens in the absence of that. When we don't have the self awareness in the moment to simply say, oh, I'm about to have this performance review conversation with the person who thinks they're excelling, but actually they're not yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like this is messy. I'm uncomfortable. There might be some big feelings and I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that. So being able to name it, I'm experiencing the vulnerability of I'm about to do something courageous, and then ensuring that you're making up the story that feeling of discomfort doesn't mean that you're weak or broken, but rather that you're about to do something brave. So having the compassion to be with yourself in that moment. And what happens when we don't have that capacity yet, and this is a learned skill, like you said, is when that happens, when that plays out in your brain without awareness, we drop into threat. And we know threat, fight, flight, freeze, and appease. That's what happens in our nervous system. So what does fight look like at work? Fight looks like shame, blame. It's problems everybody else, right? Those guys in accounting, if only they could get their stuff together, right? And that doesn't help us do big, audacious things in our organizations. Flight, what does that look like in organizations? Tapping out, not having the card conversation, avoiding it, talking about people instead of to people. And then finally, what does freeze and appease look like? Well, that looks like telling someone what they want to hear instead of what they need to know, like your student was so brave to not do for you. That's what I would share.
Wonderful. Erica, what's your why? What is it specifically about courage that drives you to focus on this character strength?
Yeah, I loved this question because I had to think about it. And that was a helpful exercise. It always is. And I really came down to this one pivotal memory. So I was a dancer when I was a kid. And I worked my way up to this place where I was teaching classes, not just taking classes. And I got this incredible opportunity to teach an adult tap class. So here I am. I mean, I don't even know. I'm probably 16 at best, right? And the ladies come in and, I've got two left feet. I couldn't possibly, right? They're about to do this courageous thing and they're feeling terrified. And then to watch their excitement, passion, and just keep going and showing up. And then by the end of 3 months, they're doing a full tap routine. That watching that progression of the human spirit and human potential sort of play out, and as a 16-year-old, like, whew, that was pretty addictive. So I've been on that ride ever since. And I think the thing I'm chasing, right, is being a part of that both for myself and others. And how does courage fit there? I think it's the path. It's the only way. Um, it's the muscle that must be flexed. So Joseph Campbell is a philosopher and writer, and he has this beautiful quote of the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And so if we really want the treasures that we have as humans, passion, connection, our values, if we aspire to that, the only way to that is to enter the cave that we fear, right? In ourselves. And it's usually facing ourselves. And the only way to do that is flexing that courage muscle. So I think to me, it feels like the best path to helping support um, my coaching clients and myself to live a bigger, fuller life.
Erica, that's wonderful. And, as the theme that's kind of the undercurrent here is it's about connecting with people, and that is that first pathway, a courage pathway that I'll be talking about in these next 8 podcasts. And when I look at connection, is it's the capacity to be able to communicate with another person or people in there, and the power behind that, and sometimes there needs to be a level of bravery to actually make that connection, because there can be a fear of rejection, fear of not belonging. And it reminds me when I was working on the Courage Keeper book, and was up at St. Mary's College, which is in South Bend, connecting close to Notre Dame. It's where my wife works also, and I was doing some work in the library on it, but I went off campus to a Starbucks beforehand, and it was fairly early in the morning, and they welcomed me in there, good morning, and it was genuine, and it kind of set my day off. And then what I did is I came back to campus, and I started, walking through campus, and St. Mary's is an all-women's school, and I walked by one student, and I go, "Hi, how are you?" And she actually said, "Fine, fine." Then I walked by another student, and she looked at me and just kept on going, and I realized, like, well, I'm not sure what I represented there being on campus, that other people didn't know me, but it brought me to understanding some of the research, and there's some research that's been done regarding Starbucks, where the investigators had some people actually go into the Starbucks and say, carry on a conversation with the barista, and they did, and then they followed those people for the rest of the day and interviewed them at the end of the day, and communicating to them that they had a higher level of subjective well-being. And then they had another group of people go in and say, don't just do your transaction. Don't have to say a word. Go in, get your coffee, okay, check out. And the people who actually connected more, were actually, had a higher level of well-being at that time. I found that fascinating. And what are some of your takes on the notion of connection?
Yeah, thank you. I love that you shared that study, it really hits home for me because I've lived alone for many years, and often the barista would be
Really?
the first person I would human I would speak to, and really greeted me and connected with me. And I think that little interchange was honestly more important than the caffeine I was
Really?
purchasing.
Yeah.
So I feel that very, very intuitively. And it reminds me of another study that I also heard about, where it was like the difference between when you sit down on a flight. This was particularly a cross country flight, and when you sit down and greet your neighbor, they measured that your heart rate was lower for the whole, 8-hour flight, right?
Interesting. Wow.
So it's a beautiful transition to, I think, I'll describe, and I am not a neuroscientist, but this is what I've gleaned from reading a lot of things. So, please know that I am not a deep expert, but my understanding is, right, that, and I've learned from leaders over the years, like, leadership is actually a nervous system regulation game, right? And so doing these big, audacious goals that we're asking of our folks in organizations today requires that feeling of connection. That's where all the creativity and the outside of the box ideas and the big strategy and the discretionary effort comes from. It comes from when we are connected to one another. So the thing that gets in the way of our connection is that fear, right? And just to take that a step further, is actually this idea about the human emotion of shame. So, shame is the feeling of I am not enough. You talked about it a little bit in one of your stories. So, when you got that feedback, both in the second and third story from the students, right? So this is, sometimes it's not, I'm not lovable enough. Sometimes I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not beautiful enough, whatever that is for us in the moment. The shame is that belief that I am not enough. And in particular, it is, I am so flawed that I'm not worthy of love and belonging. And when we're in that shame, it is literally like being voted off the island, when being part of the tribe was what kept us alive. So we're voted off the island. We have to spend the night alone, and we're going to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, right? And we will be dead by morning. So it is that feeling in our body. It is that visceral and deep of a fear, right? That fear of disconnection. We are neurobiologically wired for connection. So the antidote to that feeling of shame is empathy and connection. Because when someone else can be in our life and say, you are enough, in fact, not in spite of your imperfections, but along with your imperfections, you are enough, you are whole, and I want to be in connection with you. That is the antidote. That is the medicine that allows us to be brave and face those fears. So there's something about connection, and we hear it, in the reduced heart rate, in the better feelings throughout the day when we have connection with people, that we remind our nervous system that we're safe, and from a place of safety we can do bigger things and be more courageous. So I think that's, what else would I want to say about that? I think that's the big part. I guess I would let me just share something in my own life for how this works,
Sure.
right? So last year, it just so happened, it was like within a couple weeks' time, I had two clients who left my practice without explanation. And that was really hard for me as a coach, right? It's essentially being fired, right? That's what it feels like. That's your first draft of the story you make up about what happened. It's like, oh, I'm not enough as a coach. I'm not enough as a person. I'm not fill in the blank. And my friend, Sarah, is a dear friend and a dear colleague. And she was able to sit with me. And step one, just sit in those difficult feelings with me without trying to fix them and
That's
feel
great.
that connection,
Hmm.
in my imperfections, that I wasn't going to be turned away or judged or voted off the island, right? So being able to see me in my pain. And then step two, she also reminded me of the value I have, that this wasn't every client ever, that this was a very small data point. And then also lean into what I might have to learn. And finally, that maybe, in fact, what was really going on had absolutely nothing to do with me or my coaching. And that there are clients that other things are happening in their life and they are no longer able to come to coaching for a variety of reasons. Now, I would never know the answer, but with her support, I pulled myself out of my shame spiral so that I could learn, because that's the real point. I grew as a coach tremendously with her mentorship and support. And I was able to, like you did, I mean, it's a similar story, right? I was able to keep
Yes,
growing and growing. And what I might have done without that connection is kind of shrunk in myself. I might really have, if I'd stayed in that shame story, I might have become less and smaller of a coach because that confidence might have been impacted. So that's, I think, in my life, how a connection has really made the difference in my ability. And I think in this case, being brave meant staying in the profession even when you're not necessarily getting this glowing feedback. Yeah.
and Sarah, as your courage keeper, she helped you to really help you to dispute the limiting belief that kind of snuck up on you there.
I did.
Yeah,
That's exactly what she did. Yeah, she helped me. She helped me rewrite an operating system that was a lot more supportive and
that's great.
a lot more likely to lead to my growth
That's
instead of
wonderful.
my shrinking. Yeah.
Sure. And finally, Erica, what's a challenge that you'd like to pose to the audience?
Yeah. I love this question. I have three challenges. They're sort of maybe of increasing difficulty, but maybe not. You decide. So the first one is just an invitation from John's Starbucks story, right? Where might you stay more open to little moments of human connection? Might even be a stranger. So next time you get on a flight, smile at your seatmate and say, hello. You have to, it's not even like, you don't even have to have a conversation. Just nod, make eye contact, and sit down, right? So that's challenge number one. I will also add that Sarah and I sat next to each other at the Dare to Lead certification training.
Okay.
So that was, she was a stranger only a few years back. So,
Wow.
um, and then the second is to cultivate your Sarahs, right? So ask yourself, who are the people in my life who can show up for me and help me be brave? Who are my courage keepers? And then how might you cultivate those relationships and how might you reciprocate? How might you be a courage keeper for them, right? And then finally, I would offer, like, if you have someone that you're recognizing, you're like, no, when I try and do something brave, they're scared for me. And so it actually doesn't help me be more brave. It kind of helps, makes me question whether or not to do this courageous thing.
Hmm.
I think in that case, how might you be better at asking for what you need from this person in your life? And so, my dear husband, I shared the story and he's given me permission to do so. But, all these skills, like empathy is a skill and you learn it. And so, very early on, he's an engineer and he likes to fix things and his value comes from fixing things. He's very good at it. And if I want to fix something, he's the first person I'm going to come to.
Sure.
But sometimes, like at the start of a moment when you've had that terrible news, you just want someone to sit with you in your pain. And I taught him the phrase, that sounds really hard. And then I taught him to stop talking. And he is such a wonderful, supportive person that he really heard me, and he does that. And he knows now when I just need that. So again, I think the invitation is to, cultivate the relationships that are already providing that kind of support. And then it's also okay to ask for what you need and help people be a better courage keeper for you.
I love those challenges. So, folks, any of those or combinations of those, and would love to hear about that on connecting with us, in comments on the website there. Thank you so much, Erica. Really appreciate your thoughts. I really appreciate you flipping the script and suggesting that we do that earlier on. And, as a thought leader for Courage Keepers, Erica will also be, for the next year, will be posting a blog monthly on the Courage Keepers website, along with also our Facebook and LinkedIn sites at there too. And for any other more information about and to learn more about Erica and her bio, you can go to thecouragekeepers.com. Well, thanks, folks, for being here for the inaugural Courage Keepers podcast, which is powered by Yeager Leadership. Thanks for joining us. And our next podcast will focus on the combination of the core value and commitment pathways. Thank you very much, folks, and have a wonderful day.
So great to be with you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.